I've been getting a lot of requests for more tutorial and content about 4D Gaussian splatting. And honestly, it's a great sign since people are really starting to get excited about dynamic Gaussians and volumetric video. Even though I don't have a real multi-camera capture rig or proper studio setup for recording this kind of a material by myself, I've still been contacted by a few people who are willing to share their footage and dataset for 4DGS experiments. One of these cool people is Nick from Berlin, and based on the image sequences that he captured, I've been able to develop and even slightly improve my workflow for draining PLY sequences. So let's take a look. Hey everyone, it's Olli here again. 4D Gaussians have been getting a lot of attention lately, especially after this Chinese developer team behind 4DV.ai launched their website. Their highly impressive demo clips show that fully volumetric 4D Gaussian videos can actually be played back directly in a web browser. This kind of a dynamic Gaussian motion doesn't rely on sequences or separate PLY files. Instead, here individual Gaussians are analyzed and interpolated across frames. Only the Gaussians that actually change between the frames get updated. So the system doesn't need to regenerate the entire model for every single frame. That's why this type of dynamic representation is the proper and most efficient way to visualize volumetric videos. It also must keep file sizes significantly smaller, which makes loading and delivering these experiences over the web much easier. However, since this dynamic representation is still outside my own reach for now and it requires more research, we'll focus on something a bit more traditional in this video, the classic sequence-based 4DGS workflow. As I mentioned earlier, I was contacted by this guy Nick from Berlin. He's a real multimedia all-rounder, a clever designer and rig builder, and Nick has created a portable capture rig that can be transported in a car and set up almost anywhere in just a few minutes. Nick's multi-camera rig is built from a cross-shaped aluminum tube structure, and onto this frame he can easily mount multiple DSLR cameras. All of them can be triggered simultaneously using his custom-built synchronization mechanism. For this project, Nick did a few tests and recorded several short clips of himself using a total of 14 cameras. They were arranged in a compact semicircular arc in the front of him. And although this kind of a setup doesn't produce a full 360 experience, it can still be used to test how partial 3D video plays. The motion was captured as video, and later Nick extracted the footage into image sequences and sent them to me. So when I started working on this project, what I had in front of me was a collection of numbered folders, and each folder contained 14 images captured from all different camera angles. But before we dive deeper into processing these sequences, let's take one step back and look at the bigger picture. While there are many different ways to extract images from video, in this tutorial I want to walk you through the entire workflow using my own scripts and small helper application tools that allows us to generate the final PLY sequences from start to finish. The method I use relies heavily on Postshot, which is currently one of the most reliable and user-friendly Gaussian splatting trainers available. However, since Postshot is no longer offered as a free beta that everyone could test, I want to point out something important. For this workflow, we'll need the CLI version of Postshot. My patch trainer tool depends entirely on this command line functionality, and at the moment the CLI is only included with the Postshot Studio license. So if you want to follow and make this entire workflow exactly as shown, you'll need to access the Studio version. Everything else, the scripts and small utilities I've created, is completely free, and you can download them from my code page. You'll find the link in the description. And now that everything is ready, we can start the process. The process of sequence-based 4D material proceeds as follows. At the beginning, the video files are extracted from the cameras used in the capture rig. These files need to be synchronized and edited with each other to frame accuracy so that they simultaneously show the same recorded scene from different angles. I usually use very short MP4 files, each of which covers a maximum of about 300 frames of a scene. Then we can open the image organizer software that I developed and drag all these synchronized source videos into it. The scripts goes through each video frame by frame and organize the image from each angle into the designated frame folder. So when the process of this step is complete, we will have a folder called Organized Frames. And now from here we can select any frame folder for reference processing, which will be performed in the Postshot program. Reference frame processing is done only for the purpose where we can get camera coordinates data and the point cloud info. Therefore, it is not necessary to train Gaussians very far. We can stop the process at early iteration steps. This is enough for us to get the camera positions and the sparse point cloud so that we can use them as a master setting for all frames in the sequence later. So now we can activate this image layer from Postshot and select this Action tab underneath it. From here we now find a function that allows us to export the call map data that was used in our radiance field. Then we just choose a good place for it on our hard drive. The reference process also includes saving the crop box information, because we don't want to render every single splat in our scene and because we want to optimize and reduce the file sizes of the sequence, we need to activate the crop box function. So by using the move, rotate and scale tools, I'll transfer this box to the area where Nick's character is playing with the ball. I make sure that the character's movement fits inside the box area. Now, from here in the parameters table, I can see what the X, Y and Z translate coordinates of the box area are. The most important values here are the translate and scale values. The rotation value is irrelevant because we won't able to use it later. Since Postshot handles fairly precise decimal values, we can round these numbers to easier to remember even numbers. Same goes for the scale values, but these numbers needs to be handled with a special trick, which I'll explain later. Since there is no specific way to memorize these values we entered here, I will use a screen capture function and save an image of the crop box values so that I can use it as a note later. Okay, the next step is to spread and copy that referenced call map data into each frame folder. So we can come back to my image organizer software and use this insert function in here. It works like this. First we select the folder that contains our frames, which is the organized frames folder we created earlier. Then we select what data we want to copy inside these frame folders. So we go to the callmap data directory that we exported from Postshot and select only these three files: camera bin, images bin, and points 3D bin. Then we are ready to copy callmap data to each frames. This function happens very quickly and we can close the image organizer after this. Next we are left with adjusting the Postshot Batch trainer. I have updated this program a bit, and once we have set the input and output directories, we can bring up this crop box feature from here. In this pop-up window we can now enter the same values that we collected from Postshot when we were working with that reference frame. And now I'll bring that screenshot image of the values here so I can better remember what the values were. So translate X, Y and Z values can be typed as is. But with these scale values we have to follow a different result. The scale values must each be multiplied by 2. Otherwise the effect of the crop box will be incomplete and only half of its size will be realized. When we put double values in these fields, then the crop box will work as we set it in the Postshot. And if we want, we can use these same values for the so-called ROI box too. It means region of interests, and it can focus the training in that same area and make the end result a bit better in greater iteration steps. But here in our case it really doesn't make a difference, since we are going to train each frames only to 5K iteration steps to make overall processing time faster. I have added one more small feature to this version of Batch Trainer. This button here at the bottom corner brings up a command line window where you can get the entire CLI command prompt with all parameters that have been set in this user interface. It's handy if you want to run the CLI version and test how the training at single frame works and what kind of a result to get before rendering entire large and time-consuming sequence. But now we are finally ready to run and generate the whole Gaussian PLY sequence with these settings. And this part of the process takes time. Depending how many frames we are training, in here it can take about 3 to 5 minutes for each frame with these rather low iteration steps values. But after all, since we are now training only the cropped area of the entire scene, we get much more convenient file sizes for each PLY file. While the batch trainer is running, we have a lot of time to drink coffee and do other things. But when we finally finish the sequence, we can open Postshot and drag all the PLY frame files there. And after we have set the end frame values to match our sequence, we can hit the play button and see what kind of a 4D GS animation we managed to create. And of course, we immediately notice that the sequence contains a lot of flickering Gaussians and floating artifacts noise. This is completely expected and normal for this kind of a 4D GS material that was not produced in studio conditions, since the material was recorded outdoors in uneven light. Cameras with low frame rates and shutter speeds are not the best quality for this kind of a job. Motion blur easily produced blurry and uneven splats. Also, the fact that we left the iteration step to only 5000 to save time affects final result. With larger number, the amount of noise can be decreased. But since this is just a test and the purpose was to practice the crop box function anyway, we can consider this a successful experiment. The arrangement is slightly improved when the sequence is placed against static background in Postshot. 14 cameras give us some leeway, and 3D works best when we look at the movement from the angles from which it was photographed. Various clips shows that the sequence is feasible and can be run even if the sequence is over 300 frames long. But you have to remember that even though we are not rendering or straining the entire scene here, even PLY models cut with a crop box take up the space, and the longer the sequence, the more the volumetric implementation eats up the space on your hard drive. Perhaps noise and artifacts can be reduced if the source videos are processed in After Effects, for example by rotoscoping the moving parts of the image away from their backgrounds. But that's a completely different task, and maybe that's a topic for another video. What do you think of this sequence-based method? Leave a comment below. I want to say a big thanks and shout out to Nick. This was interesting, and with the help of this material I managed to develop and update my tools a little bit. Go check out and subscribe to Nick's channel. You can find the link in the description. Now I think it is time for something other than just coffee. Thanks for watching.